In the IELTS test, you hear some recordings and you have to answer questions on them. You have time to read the instructions and questions and check your work. All recordings are played only once. The test is in 4 parts. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1. You will hear a conversation between a man and a woman as the woman inquires about membership at a sports centre. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, as the recording is not played twice. Listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello, I'm Steve. Welcome to Bruntwood Sports Centre. Can I help you?
Hello, yes, I hope you can help me. I'd like some information about joining the sports centre.
Do you have any idea about what kind of membership you'd like? We do full membership, swimming only, or gym and classes, and there are special rates for students and different age groups.
Yes, I checked online before I came here. I'd be interested in the full membership, and I wouldn't be eligible for any of the special rates.
That's great. Can I take some details from you to start with?
Of course.
First of all, what's your name?
It's Alice Watson.
Is that Watson? W-A-T-S-O-N?
That's right.
Good. Now, can I take your address, please?
It's 16 Austin Way, Bruntwood.
Is that A-U-S-T-E-N for Austin?
That's right.
And was it 16 or 60?
16.
Thanks. Do you know the postcode?
Oh yes, it's BR5 8HY.
Thank you. Now, I need your date of birth, please.
I was born on the 13th July 1996.
Are you sure you can't get a student membership?
I'm afraid not. I'm not a student. I have a full-time job.
What's your job?
I'm a dental assistant.
Now, can I take a contact telephone number for you?
Of course. My home number is 01763 973 644.
Do you have a mobile number as well, as that's often easier to reach people on?
Oh yes, it's 07772 021 388. Do you call people often?
It's not for marketing if that's what you're worried about. It's just if a class you've signed up with has changed for any reason, we can let you know and save you a wasted journey.
Oh, I see.
Before the conversation continues, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen carefully and answer questions 6 to 10.
Can I ask you some things about the facilities, please?
Of course.
I was interested in doing some classes. What ones do you run?
Well, as you've a full-time job, the ones that would be suitable for you would be the early ones, which are for 1 hour and start at either 6 or 7 a.m. We have wake-up aerobics, spinning and fat burn at both those start times.
And later in the day? I finish work at 4:30 in the afternoon.
There are aerobics, keep fit and spinning classes hourly from 4 p.m. and there are also Pilates classes and yoga classes and they're hourly from 6 p.m. At the weekends, all these classes are done regularly all through the day. The schedule changes from time to time, so I'll give you our latest schedule before you leave. The schedules are also on our website and they're always up to date.
Can I swim early too?
Oh yes, the pool is open from 6 a.m. and, as the first 3 hours are mostly used by people who are swimming for exercise, 2/3 of the pool is divided up into lanes for exercise swimming. There are 2 lanes for slow swimming, 2 for medium, and 2 for fast.
And what time does the pool close?
Well, the centre closes every day at 10:30 p.m, and so the pool closes half an hour before that. You can swim up until then every day.
Now, I'd like to ask about the gym. I've never done that, and I'd like to give it a go to see if it'll suit me.
Well, I'd recommend it. It can really develop people's core strength, and by doing that, you'll avoid injuries at other sports. It also really makes you feel good about yourself. So, our gym is open during the opening hours of the centre, and if you want to try it out, you'll need to book an induction with one of the instructors so that you get to know the machines. This will help prevent you from injuring yourself. Inductions are free for full members. Another thing you can do is book a regular session with a personal trainer. This is a great way of getting fit. Not only is it harder to be lazy and avoid going for your session, but the trainers are great motivators.
Those are great ideas. Thanks. I'll definitely try that.
That is the end of part 1. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to part 2. Part 2. You will hear a woman giving some information about facilities at a holiday resort. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully to the information talk and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this information talk. Most of you arrived here at the Sun and Sand Resort yesterday evening, and it's my job today to let you know a little bit about what's available for you here and where these things are. We are currently in the main reception area. If you leave here, you'll find the ornamental lake right in front of you. Directly opposite, you'll find the bus stop, which I'll tell you more about later. If you take the path from the right-hand side of the lake, you'll pass the mini-golf on your left and, just after that, the swimming pool on the right. If you continue down the path, you'll reach the sports center, where you can use the resort's gym and squash courts and also take part in the regular exercise classes that we run there. If you take the left-hand path from the lake, this will take you to the resort's private beach. On the way down, you'll see our tennis courts on the right-hand side. When you arrive at our beach, you'll see our snack bar on the right-hand side just behind the beach. Food and drink is available here. Back across the path from the snack bar is the activities office, which is also behind the beach. If you're not the type of person who just likes lying on the beach all day, you can visit this office and they'll give you details about the kayaks, sailing boats, pedalos, and various other beach equipment that we have. Finally, our beach is enclosed on both sides, and the area to the far left as you arrive by the path is reserved for over 18s. People can find there a quiet place away from the noise of children if they so wish.
You now have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen to the rest of the information talk and answer questions 16 to 20.
So, now that I've told you a little about where things are, I'd like to give you some information about them all. I mentioned earlier the resort's bus stop. This is from where our dedicated minibuses leave to take residents into the nearby town. This is 7 miles away, so taking this complimentary bus service is your best way of getting to the town. We also have a dedicated taxi at the hotel that you can use at any time if you wish, but this service must be paid for. Swimming at the resort's pool can be enjoyed only when there is a lifeguard on duty. This starts at 6:30 a.m. and finishes at 7:30 p.m. Swimming is all part of the Sun and Sand Resort's all-inclusive package. Exercise classes and use of the gym in the sports center are all complimentary, but lights for the squash courts have to be paid for. Coins have to be inserted into the meters so that you can have the light to play by. Booking a squash court itself is free. If you'd like to play tennis, book a court at reception. This is part of Sun and Sand Resort's all-inclusive package, as is use of all the recreational equipment at the beach, though a returnable $20 deposit is required for all equipment. Eating and drinking at the main buildings of the resort are also inclusive, but the beach snack bar is extra and things can be paid by cash or be put on the guests' bills. There is a deep-sea fishing activity that can be booked from reception. This is contracted out to a local fisherman and not part of the Sun and Sand Resort's package. The price list for the different fishing options available can be found at reception. Finally, we have entertainment at the main buildings of the hotel every evening. People can enjoy their inclusive food and drink dinners whilst enjoying the music, magic, dancing, or whatever is billed on the different evenings. We have quiz evenings weekly and sometimes comedy acts as well. We ask $1 for each team member for the quiz pot so that we can make a prize for the winners who get the whole pot.
That is the end of part 2. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to part 3. Part 3. You will hear 2 students and their teacher discussing a field trip that the students are going to conduct. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hello, Dr. Rogers. Can we speak to you for a moment?
Oh, hello, Samantha. Hello, Eric. Yes, I'm free. What can I do for you?
It was about our geography field trip. We wanted to explain to you a little about it so that we know that we're doing the right thing.
Okay, off you go.
Well, to begin with, we decided our field trip will focus on the River Stour. The river is not far from where we both live, so that will help us when we need to do secondary visits to it.
Yes, that'll be useful. It's sometimes only later on, during a project, that people realise they need further data, and a long journey can sometimes be very awkward to arrange.
That's what we thought.
Well, I'm glad you're taking those things into account. Now, you'll need to go right up to the source of the river to get the correct readings.
Oh, yes. We'll begin there. We'll be doing a road trip for a few days to collect all the information we need.
What sorts of things will you be studying at the river?
We'll be looking at how the River Stour is part of the area's different watersheds.
What sort of data will you be collecting?
We'll be taking water samples along the length of the river to start with. We'll also need data on flow levels, but of course we won't be able to get good figures on that in one trip. Samantha and I are going to visit the National River Authority's offices in Stourbridge. They have all the data there that we need.
Have you got an appointment with them?
Yes, one of the water officers will be meeting us and will give us admittance to the archives that we need. The people at the National River Authority were very helpful when I called them.
Good. Now, you'll also need more data than what you've mentioned so far if you want to examine the area's watersheds.
Yes, we know that. Watersheds themselves consist of all surface water and include lakes, streams, reservoirs and wetlands, as well as all groundwater and aquifers. We'll need to work on all these water systems in the area. We won't be able to include everything in our project, as the word limit is relatively short. Our plan is to include a bit of everything, but focus on the role of the River Stour in the area's watersheds.
That all sounds fine.
You now have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen to the rest of the discussion and answer questions 26 to 30.
I also wanted to ask about when we have to give in the project.
Well, last year the students had to give it in on the 1st of October. A lot of students found that they didn't have enough time though, so I was thinking of making it exactly a month later. However, I'm not really sure yet. You've plenty of time right now, so just keep an eye on the department website and I'll post the due date when I'm sure.
And what is the exact word limit?
There's a 5,000 word limit, but don't forget you need to include appendices with any background detail that you need to provide. I will also require an annotated bibliography with all of the sources that you used. Now, these latter two things aren't included in your word limit, but you need to be aware that this is quite a lot of extra material that needs to be included in your projects.
Is there any equipment that you could recommend we take, Dr. Rogers?
Of course, there are lots of things that you'd find useful. You'll need a water chemistry test kit, turbidity tubes, TDS probes, nets, hip waders, compasses, stopwatches, and a field guide of that area. Although you can buy all these things online, you might as well sign them out from the department for nothing. There's a returnable deposit, but it's not too excessive.
That's very handy advice, Dr. Rogers. Thanks.
What I must also remind you about is to take security precautions. I know that you are all quite responsible, but being around water can always have potential dangers, and you must take particular care if there's been a lot of rain and the river is high. First of all, stay together. If one of you falls in or gets into difficulties, then the other immediately knows about it and can do something. The other major thing to take care about is washing your hands after being in contact with the water. River water is not as clean as it used to be, and if you come into contact with river water and then eat without washing your hands, you run the risk of ingesting bacteria. This can lead to all sorts of tummy upsets.
That is the end of part 3. You will now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 4. You will hear an extract from a talk entitled Health on the Night Shift. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on pages 8 and 9. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, everybody. In this session, I want to continue looking at health issues relating to the workplace. And I'd like to focus today on night shift workers and the health problems that are associated with their working hours. I'm sure you're all aware that there has been a huge increase in the number of workers doing regular night shifts in recent years, mainly because of the number of shops and services now open 24 hours, 7 days a week. And we need to look more closely at the consequences of changing work and sleep patterns like this. So that's what I'd like us to do today. Now, research that has been carried out in both the U.S. and Britain on night working suggests that it leads to a lot of health problems for the workers, and they point to three main reasons for this. The first one is what they call the internal clock, and this is a basic sort of program in our brains. This tells us that at certain times we should feel hungry, at other times we should be awake, at other times we should be asleep, and so on. And it seems to be generally accepted by all the experts in the field that this clock is linked to not just our behavioral habits, but to cycles of light and dark, and that means that we're programmed to be awake when it's light, i.e. during the day, and asleep when it's dark. The second thing is that night workers are continually fighting against what is termed a sleep debt. And by this, the researchers mean that it's just practically impossible for them to get a sufficient amount of sleep in daylight hours. In fact, studies suggest that on average, night workers only get between 5 and 6 hours of sleep, rather than the 8 they need. And the effects of not getting enough sleep can also lead to all sorts of problems, and we'll talk about those in a minute. The third cause of these problems is the unsocial hours that night workers have to keep. The fact that they are working when their families, their friends are sleeping, and vice versa. And that kind of dislocation from their social group can be very damaging. Okay, so let's take a closer look at some of these effects. And if we have a look at the physical effects first, we can see that studies on long-term shift workers found that they were much more likely to get heart problems than day workers. In addition, there seems to be a very high incidence of stomach problems, for example, ulcers among night shift workers. And although this may be partly due to the wrong sort of diet, snacking on fast food, it can't be just explained by eating habits. And finally, there is evidence to suggest that night shift workers also get ill more frequently with minor problems like colds and infections. The frequency of these illnesses is much higher than among day workers, and this indicates that night working can damage immunity to illness. And of course, this leads to a lot of absence from work, too. However, although the physical impact of working nights can be severe, perhaps the real problems are psychological ones. And the most common problem is depression. This seems to be the inevitable result of the constant feeling of tiredness and a lack of energy that night workers universally complain of. Secondly, there is a lot of evidence from accident statistics to suggest that mental abilities are badly affected, and that means, for example, decision-making ability and planning ability. And these are what control our performance. For example, we can see that the highest number of errors on the roads occur between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., the point in our internal clock when we feel most sleepy. Okay. Finally, there are the social problems, where night working impacts on the family and social life of the employees. The first one is obviously the breakup of family life, and here we can see from the divorce statistics that this occurs more frequently in the case of night workers. But there's also the breakdown of other relationships, not just within the family, but among the peer group. Night workers tend to lose touch with friends, and these relationships, especially for the long-term night workers are very difficult to rebuild. And so this eventually leads to social isolation for the individual. And of course, that has consequences for the whole community too. So we can begin to see the real cost of night working. What we need to do now is to look at how